Okay, so this is not going to completely match the notes that I've posted. I've decided to go at it in a slightly different order, but it'll all be there. And you're gonna, if this is, you're taking notes based on this, leave yourself room to fill in, or don't put something down until I get to it. So we're talking about development in embryos. And there's a food source, right? That was the whole point of the egg cell, is to provide food to the embryo, so it not only can do all the division and differentiation stuff, but it can also grow. It can pull in nutrients and grow. And growth is a combination of bigger cells and more cells, right? Cells get bigger, cells add more cells. We talked about differentiation. Cells become different. In some cases, you need cells that are in place to get out of the way. That's how your hand develops, is it starts as basically a paddle, and the cells in what are going to be the spaces between your fingers die off. Is that the webbing goes down to just a little bit of webbing left over, unless of course you're a fish and the webbing stays. But apoptosis, elimination of cells, can be an important developmental issue. A lot of different living things go through stages. We talk about an embryo and a fetus stage. Is that the basic difference is, and when you look it up, you're going to get a very old definition of this. If you go online, you look this up, you'll get a very dated version of what differentiates the fetus stage from the embryo stage. Basically, during the embryo stage, stuff is being put in place. Is that all of the organs are located. They may not be functional, they may not be fully developed, but they're there. And once everything is kind of laid out, the embryo stage is a layout stage. Once everything is kind of laid out, then you're in the fetal stage. Now the old archaic definition has to do, it's when cartilage starts to turn into bone. And that is close to the dividing line, except it's not really a good definition for the dividing line. Is that, yeah, the skeleton is laid out in cartilage, and the cartilage is mostly replaced by bone eventually. But that particular stage may not be, all the other organs may not be in place yet. It's a fuzzy definition, and so not a particularly good marker. Now, in some animals, there's what's called the larval stage. Sometimes the larval stage is a fully functional stage, very often it is, where it is a self-feeding stage. It could be a small immature version of what's going to eventually be the adult. The adult is usually the stage that is capable of reproducing itself. It may be, we tend to think of larvae as being significantly different from the adults. That happens in animals that go through metamorphosis, as it happens in a lot of insects, not all insects, but a lot of insects, the caterpillar to butterfly, or the maggot to fly stage. But in metamorphosis, there's often a bridge stage, the pupa, where the larva has to change into the adult. So there's a lot of different stages that the different animals will go through. What you're eventually working toward is classes of cells that do different sorts of things, and those are typically called tissues. In animals, there's 4 or 5 types of tissues depending on who you talk to. The fifth one, reproductive tissue, cells that can undergo meiosis, and the cells that are made that way, not always considered a separate type of tissue. In some of them, it's considered with the covering tissues, the epithelial tissues, which do a lot of reproducing anyway, but a lot of mitosis. But that's what you get. You get a covering type of tissue, epithelium, which very often causes linings, but also tends to secrete things. You get nervous tissue that can conduct electrochemical processes. You get muscle tissue that can contract and move things. You get connective tissue, which is a combination of structural material and stuff that's really hard to put into any other category. is that typically defined as living cells in a non-living matrix. So bone and cartilage and ligaments and tendons classify pretty easily. But then you wind up with blood, which is living cells in non-living plasma, and fat, which is blobs of fat that aren't even between the cells, but it still tends to be put in. We covered tissues in the first semester. But categories. Plants also have categories of tissues. They also have a covering. Well, they actually have epithelial tissue, sometimes called dermal tissue. They have support tissue, so similar to our connective tissue, but that is often also used for storage. Although fat, I guess, qualifies as that too. They have vascular tissue that conducts, water and nutrients up to the leaves and sugar juice down to the lower parts of the cell. And they have meristem. Here's where things start to get a little different between animals and plants. Animals, they hit the end of the embryo stage, they've differentiated, they put everything in place, and then those different cells start to do different things and grow within and make more cells as they grow, most of them. Plants make cells in a type of tissue called meristem, which grows at the tips of roots and stems and the nodes where leaves come out, but it makes cells at those meristematic areas and around the outside of a dicot, layers that are going to be the rings. But those cells eventually differentiate to be the leaves and the rest of the root and the stems. So their dividing cells are a very specific type of tissue that then differentiate as the plant grows. Is that our differentiation tends to happen early, and then we grow from that. Plant cells grow and then differentiate the cells after they've made them. Something similar happens with funguses, where you get cells growing out from where the original spore settled, and you get zones. And the zones differentiate according to a lot of it having to do with what nutrients are available and how reproduction happens. And again, that's something that we covered in the first semester. Just looking to see what else I've got here. I'm going to skip over some stuff that's in the notes because, with this weird semester, I don't want to throw too much stuff in here. Yeah, I'm gonna skip through the early embryo development of plants and the fungal development. We did cover it in the first semester, so this would have just been kind of a repeat of things, which I told you we were going to do. But I know that I've already covered it, and I'm trying not to, overwhelm. The last video was a little bit longer than it should have been, and I should have looked further ahead and gone, I'll leave that stuff out, and I could have shortened the videos into two of more reasonable length. But that will do it for this particular chapter, and this is a nice short video.